As a heads up, since the entirety of Book 2 of Infinity Train already aired, my reviews for these individual episodes will be created in retrospect of the entire season, so I do not recommend watching my reviews if you haven't yet seen all 10 episodes of Cracked Reflection. And if you haven't seen Infinity Train at all, but for some reason clicked on this video, just go watch Infinity Train, please. It's so good. With that warning out of the way, I'm not going to be calling the main character Mirror Tulip or MT. She settled for being identified as MT for a time because she had nothing else to fall back on, but she obviously wasn't happy with those initials, and she never wanted to be viewed as a reflection of someone else.
So your name, MT? Does it stand for Mirror Tulip?
It's not my name. I'm just letting you call me that.
Thus, in all my forthcoming reviews on Book 2, I'll be calling her by the name she picks for herself in the final episode, Lake. Now, that being said about Lake being her own person, I do have to admit the transition from no longer having Tulip in the show was made easier by Lake taking on the role of primary character. Well, at least for me it was. Lake and Tulip do have some overlap in their personalities. They're both headstrong, a bit brash, both of them like to feel independent, while ultimately still favoring companionship. And then, of course, Ashley Johnson voices the both of them, and does phenomenal work, may I add. So while Lake would probably be annoyed at me for drawing these parallels to the person she used to reflect, those faint traces of Tulip did help ease the initial transition into Lake's and Jesse's own personal journeys. When I first heard Infinity Train was going to have multiple seasons, I was a bit worried because I absolutely loved the characterization of Tulip in Book 1, so I feared that journeying through the train without her wouldn't quite have the same magic, but nah, I'm happy to say that fear turned out to be unfounded. Book 2 was fucking fantastic! So let's talk about the first episode already. It kicks off with Lake brimming with confidence, determined to explore the world around her on her own terms, after a pretty metal makeover. What a dangerous, though efficient, way to buzz your own head. I really liked how she kept the pen chain from the first car she visited after escaping the chrome car as a memento that she transforms into something else, a bracelet. Partially out of necessity, as the original object is reflective, but also it serves as a nice symbolic gesture of Lake's own transition and transformation of her identity. The music in this brief opening montage was so, well, as the cat might say, je ne sais quoi. While I just referred to the music as indefinable, I'll still try my best to describe how the music made me feel. It evoked this tender call to adventure, this invitation to mystery and wonder that carries a sense of vulnerability. It epitomizes Lake's character arc very well, and the sound captures the beauty but also difficulty of self-discovery. It's this wonderful, complex blend of emotions. I somehow forgot to mention the music in my videos on Book 1, but Chrome Canyon was the composer for both seasons of Infinity Train under direction from Owen Dennis, the creator/showrunner, and all of the music across both books is just superb. It often manages to have this haunting allure to it, and does so much to accentuate the emotions felt in each scene. And this opening theme for Book 2, which also plays during the credits, does such a spectacular job of placing us into Lake's headspace as she sets out across the train, and also immersing you into the experience of watching the show. Like, after this opening montage, I was hooked. Then we see what looks like Amelia's mechapod, and I did a big ol' double take. Turns out the cockpit of Amelia's mech was made by repurposing her own pod, or someone else's I guess, which is pretty neat. We actually saw Tulip's pod in Book 1 really briefly in the background, right after she wakes up on the train. See, there it goes, flying away. After regaining the position of conductor due to Tulip's help, 1-1 decided to add a video introduction to the pod delivery system, briefly summarizing how the train works, rather than leaving people in the dark to figure it out for themselves. The decision that people should set out through the train informed about their number was clearly a post-Tulip development, as the video featured Atticus. I actually had some mixed feelings upon seeing the video, because 1-1 is fully embracing the Infinity Train as this positive vehicle for personal growth, when we know people can die on it from very real hazards and danger, and we know that people can become worse off while staying on the train, potentially for the rest of their lives. I'm not convinced the train is a net good. Some of the kidnapped people learn to adapt and overcome and emerge better from the experience, but that doesn't justify the outcomes that can be categorized as negligence or indirect murders. Now normally, I'd be delighted at the concept of a morally ambiguous robot that kidnaps troubled people into a magical world and then leaves them to their own devices to sort themselves out. Or not. My conflicted feelings stem entirely from how much of a bond Tulip and 1-1 developed due to their adventures, only for 1-1 to continue indulging in this hands-off, chaotic, gray area morality, with the only change being a lighthearted introduction video. I guess I just thought the experiences with Tulip would change 1-1's role as conductor more than they did. That being said, I'm still a pretty big fan of the train being run by a somewhat unhinged, manic, but ultimately well-meaning robot. It is possible 1-1 plans to intervene for prolonged cases that aren't going well, but there has yet to be any indication of this. So far, the only time 1-1 stepped in was when stuff crucial to the train's continued operation was getting destroyed. Thus, for the time being, 1-1 comes off as a bit of a psycho to me, which is both awesome and troubling.
By watching this recording, you've agreed to release the train of any liabilities.
The following scene, where Lake looks at her hand after being reminded about the number passengers are assigned, was so good! While Lake is still enjoying venturing through the train and seeing new sights, it demonstrates that she is starting to ponder about her place in the world at large, and it silently but ever so deliberately establishes the struggle that Lake will be facing later in the season. While the first episode is called The Black Market Car, we only spend a few minutes there, and all that really occurs is the big chase sequence by the Mirror Police, establishing how the Flex can emerge from surfaces that reflect Lake. The brief bits of characterization Mason Sieve do get in this episode were already established back in the Chrome Car in Book 1, so it's not like the dynamic between the two was further fleshed out or anything. I love these two dudes, but they don't really break the mold throughout the season, they mostly stick to their predefined roles. Agent Mace and Agent Sieve lose Lake's trail when a deer helps her out. A deer that has basically any ability he wants to. I found the behavior of the deer intriguing, as he exhibits situational awareness and higher intelligence, but simultaneously acts like a regular old friendly deer. It's an interesting duality that manages to be distinct from the talking intelligent animals of Season 1 like Atticus, as the deer is far less anthropomorphized in his personality. Lake forming a bond with this deer was really cute. She had that initial desire to maintain a solitary journey, but after the deer invades her comfort zone a few times, Lake realizes the deer won't be judgmental of anything she has to say and lets her guard down. She got pretty invested into unloading her life story onto a listening ear, as if sharing her circumstances allowed her to shed some of that mental weight. And I loved the moment where Lake had some initial uneasiness from physical contact, but it quickly gives way to appreciation. I doubt Lake had that much physical contact during her life in the mirror world, and she certainly didn't have any after escaping the Chrome Car, so it was really nice to see her enjoy the comfort of physical proximity to another being. Whether the deer sensed some longing in Lake, or whether he just wanted some companionship of his own, well, that's really up to the viewer to decide. Perhaps it was a bit of both. The next morning, we meet the secondary main character of Book 2, the friendly, go-with-the-flow goofball Jessie, who enjoys putting sunglasses on random animals. The argument Lake has with Jessie was pretty great, as she's clearly projecting some of her own personal issues onto the situation.
He's free! He's his own deer!
Jessie, meanwhile, comes off as almost too well-adjusted for the train. I couldn't help but wonder at this moment, okay, what is this kid's deal? Why is he here? What problems is he hiding? I really loved that aspect, though, because a lot of people do hide their problems away from the world and do a great job of putting on this cheery persona that in a way is still true to themselves, but nonetheless still obfuscates some of the personal problems they may be going through underneath. You can't always tell what state a person's mind is in from just the exterior that they present to the world. So I very much enjoyed the contrast between Lake's projection and Jessie's potential repression. I gotta side with Jessie, though, because Alan Dracula is a flippin' fantastic name for the deer, and come on, the vein-like markings, it totally makes sense. In response to all the fighting about him, it seems like Alan Dracula may have purposefully fell through the canopy so that Lake and Jessie would have to cooperate to retrieve him, although maybe that's giving him too much forethought. Seems equally likely that he was just tired of all the shouting and wanted some quiet, and thus decided to plunge through the branches, bouncing off them completely stiff as if he was a giant action figure or something. I can't with this goddamn deer, he's so eccentric. I love it. What a wacky way to end the first episode. I'm going to be making a review for each episode in Book 2 of Infinity Train, although some of those reviews will be much shorter than others. I hope you join me for the rest of my thoughts and analyses on this season. You can follow me on Twitter. I've been on a break from Twitch, but I'll start streaming video games on there again eventually. If you want to help me make more videos, consider supporting me on Patreon. My finances are pretty garbage right now. And that's enough of the self-promotion. I'll see you again in the next review.